Hi, folks. Forris Day Jr. here with Rolling Tape. Today we have William Dickerson on the show. He wrote the book Detour Hollywood, and he'll be talking a little bit about that. So let's roll tape.
This episode brought to you by Spoof Dance Film Festival. Make parody commercials and bring the funny.
William, welcome to the show.
I'm happy to be here. Thanks for having me, Forris.
And before we get talking about the book, I just want to say William is also, him and I both are contributors to Hitch 20. So check out the Hitch 20 page or the Hitch 20 videos on Borges page.
Great.
Yeah, it's awesome. It's awesome. So now, but we're here for your book. Let's talk about your book. I had to throw the plug in. Detour Hollywood, How to Direct a Micro-Budget Film, or any film for that matter.
Yeah. Well, as the title says, it's a book on how to direct, but specifically focused on the micro-budget film, which is really becoming the new norm for indie filmmaking right now. Over the past few years, Hollywood's been making less and less small movies. They're spending more and more money on these big budget tentpoles, they call them. And they've disbanded their independent film divisions. And in general, the budgets for what used to be called indie films have become so low that quite often they're made for under $1 million or less. Like we're talking a couple $100,000. So the new term is the micro budget, and I'm very familiar with this new form because that's what I've been doing for the past few years. My first movie, Detour, which we shot in 2010, was released in 2013. That was a micro-budget movie. That was made for $40,000 in the bank. I had to pull every favor I could possibly pull to get the show on the road. And it ended up being, for what it was, being a success. We sold the film. It was licensed by Warner Brothers. It got a theatrical release. So everything you could ever want. I saw it on the big screen at Grauman's Chinese. You know, it was just the thrill of my life. But the journey was so incredibly well, it was satisfying, but also torturous in many ways. I mean, we started writing the thing in 2007, before the trend of these minimalist films, because it's, if you haven't seen Detour, it's about one man, an advertising executive who is caught in his car during a mudslide. So there are other scenes in the film, but it primarily takes place around this one-man struggle in this very, very small location. So when we wrote it, we really wrote it with budget in mind. And when I went to film school, I went to AFI, I was always told, never think about budget when you're writing a script because that could limit your creativity. You know, you don't want to put that constraint on you. But I honestly feel now you have to. You absolutely have to think about budget. And quite frankly, I think limitations do breed creativity, right? You give an artist an obstacle, then all of a sudden your brain has to work harder. Right? How do I get around this? And often that leads to new and exciting ideas that you probably wouldn't have been able to think about before if you didn't have that limitation. You know, so we wrote the thing, and we meant to just shoot it in a garage with some friends, and you know, we were going to buy a clunker on Craigslist and destroy it for like a couple $1,000, but apparently the script was pretty good. This producer read it, that producer read it. Then all of a sudden we had a couple $1 million and we had stars attached. And I kind of got seduced by the temptress of Hollywood. And I went down this road for 3 years where we had all this money and buzz and people, and it all fell apart. And then we followed another path and that all fell apart. And finally, after 3 years of that, I was like, look, we can make this thing. So why not just do it? And when I set a date, I had a little bit of startup money, not much, like about $15,000 that a friend of mine, out of the kindness of his heart, invested in me. And once I set a date and started shooting, I didn't have enough money to finish it, but people who had known about the project, they saw it was becoming real. They began to get on board, and we got the thing in the can. Of course, in typical indie film fashion, when we finished the film, we had a rough cut, but not enough money for post-production, color correction, and sound. We ran out of money. But we had a good enough cut that we were able to take it to people, take it to producers, And in the best meeting I've ever had in my life, it was with Bill Todman at Level One Entertainment. They did a rendition and Grandma's Boy, among other films. And I showed it to him, and it was crazy. He was head of this big company watching this film, and he's moaning and groaning throughout the whole process. And I'm sitting there like, oh man, this is not good. Then at the end of it, he kind of just, wiggles in his chair and says, man, you don't let up in this film. I'm like, nope. He goes, how much to buy it? And we named our number, and he said, who do I write the check to? It's like a story out of Hollywood lore,
Yeah.
But still at that point, we still had a long way to go because we had to get distribution, and distribution, distributors look at it like, who's in it? And how is this at the time? How is this different than the movie Buried? Because we got compared to the Ryan Reynolds Buried. And I swear to you, they never even watched the film, because they're two, aside from the idea of a man being underground, two completely different genres, two completely different stories. But they don't really care about that. Not all these distributors think the same way, but a lot of them are very surface. Okay, how can we sell this film? What's the name? And will someone think, oh, I've seen that already? Which, I can understand that logic. It just makes it harder to sell. But long story short, Warner Brothers, Gravitas Ventures picked us up, and they had a good track. At least I think they still have a good track record of selling films to Warner Brothers. And they had sold a movie to them that was kind of a post-apocalyptic minimalist thriller. And they thought, hey, well, Detour's like this film. And Warner Brothers did very well on that. And they were, after 6 months of waiting for the right time, they were able to pitch Detour as that film to Warner Brothers, and they licensed it, and it got a release. So throughout this process, as you can imagine, I learned a heck of a lot. I made a lot of mistakes, had a lot of successful moments, and I was like, this could be a book. People nowadays, can make a micro budget film. They can go out with minimal resources, make something that looks pretty damn good. But are they telling the right story, and are they approaching it the right way? And I thought I had a lot to say on the subject.
So the book was spawned from the movie Detour. Is that how that's how it happened? Because in the book, it's mostly focused on directing. So I assume that was your main role. That you wrote it too, though, correct?
I wrote it. I don't talk too much about the screenwriting process in the book. It's more tailored toward the craft of directing. And I wanted it. The experience of Detour sparked this idea to write a book. And around the same time, I started teaching filmmaking. I teach filmmaking at New York Film Academy in Burbank here. And I brought a lot of my experience into the classroom. And as I was, workshopping and creating lectures, I thought, hey, why don't I just put this approach that I really mastered throughout this process of making Detour in a book? So the book is structured kind of in two halves. The first half of the book is a how-to direct manual. Right. So if you don't know how to direct, you want to get into directing, I try to, in a very condensed way, give you the bullet points and give you the roadmap and teach you the craft, right? As far as the way I see the craft. And then the second half of the book is how I implemented that craft into the process of Detour. So you learn how to direct. Then after you learn that process in the first half, you see how I did it in the pre-production, production, and post-production of making Detour.
And how did you learn to direct? What were your steps? Because obviously you didn't have your book in hands, and you didn't have the knowledge. So how did you learn?
That's a great question. I started making movies when I was a kid. I remember, I tell this story a lot. When I was in 6th grade, I don't think this was because of brilliance. I think it was more out of laziness at the time. But we had an assignment to do a book report on Agatha Christie's 10 Little Indians. And I asked my grandfather gave me his old camcorder, and I asked my teacher, like, hey, can I do a movie adaptation of this? And she was like, okay. I never had that question before. And we just did it with a bunch of my friends in class, and I got hooked. From that point on, I filmed everything I possibly could film, right? And I used to hook up 2 VCRs next to each other, and it was the worst thing, and go, cut from one tape to the editing was terrible, but the experience of doing it and the frustration involved really was a crash course. And if you really like filmmaking, it is a challenge, right?
Where can people get the book?
Okay, well, it's available in hard copy on Amazon.com and in some bookstores. If your bookstore doesn't have it, it's very easy for them to order it. So if you're a fan of buying books at a local bookstore, which I recommend, ask them to order it. Or if you like to read on your iPad or Kindle, you can get it on Amazon Kindle. So check it out.
A website for you.
Yeah, well, I'm at williamdickersonfilmmaker.com, and I'm not sure when this is airing, but wanted to plug my Indiegogo page for No Alternative, which is my next film, my first crowdfunding experience, which is also a full-time job, and that's a whole other interview to talk about. But if you're interested in my next movie, check it out. It's called No Alternative, and go to Indiegogo.
William Dickerson, one of our Hitch 20 guys, and author of the book Detour Hollywood, How to Direct a Micro-Budget Film or any other film for that matter. I'm Forris Day. Thank you for watching Rolling Tape. Please subscribe to our channel and you'll be updated when new videos come up. You can like and comment below. We love that. We want to hear from you. And thank you for watching this episode of Rolling Tape.